Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on banding together. It is about political cooperatives. That's what this panel is. It's a strategy panel. And you hear this phrase, political cooperatives, and you think, okay, what is that? Well, I'm here to share today, and we have Cynthia Mendes and Jennifer Rourke here to share today, that this is a transformative new model for running for office, changing a state house, and what we hope and why we're raising this up today, changing a whole country. So, and both Cynthia Mendes and Jennifer Rourke are here from the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, which is the premier trailblazing political cooperative in this country. And so without further ado, I want to bring them in to talk about how they came to start and co-found this political cooperative and how it has worked over the last two cycles. They are now in their second cycle in it. So let's start with you, Jen Rourke. You are one of the co-founders of the Rhode Island Political Cooperative. Could you take a minute or two to tell your political cooperative story, how you came to start being involved with this, and in doing that, what it is? What is a political cooperative and how does it work in Rhode Island?
So in 2018, I actually ran for office myself, along with Melanie DuPont, who's actually in the audience right now, and Janine Calkin and Matthew Brown, who was running for governor at the time. And we did not win our races. And I reached out to the party and I asked the Democratic Party for help, and they told me I didn't belong here. They told me I wasn't a part of this. They called me other. And then one day, sitting around the table, we got angry. Some of us had some alcoholic beverages, and from there came this wonderful project called Project Chicxulub, which was a project to take out the dinosaurs. Chicxulub was a meteor that took out the dinosaurs, and we were taking out the dinos in Rhode Island. And we gathered a whole bunch of candidates together, and we figured out what worked well with their campaigns and what didn't work. And we said, okay, if the Democratic Party can do it, we can do it too. So we came up with this wonderful, wonderful invention of the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, where we all work together to make sure that a shared agenda is passed on the state level, so we can make sure that our constituents not only just thrive, it's not about just thriving, they actually don't have to fight to survive. So that's how it started. And Cynthia was one of the first round of candidates that went through. So.
Thank you. So it's a collection of candidates running in different districts, but they're all running together. And let's get into the nuts and bolts of kind of how candidates run together. And so to kick that off, Senator Mendes, why don't you tell us your story of how you became involved in the co-op, and then get a little bit into how does it work?
Absolutely. So a really important point about my genesis into the Rhode Island Political Cooperative and politics at all was that I never planned to run for office. It wasn't anything I was seeking or looking for. I had spent my time doing a lot of community work, serving folks that were unhoused, mentoring youth. And one of my best friends, who had founded Mathewson Street Friendship Breakfast in Providence, which serves a lot of our unhoused neighbors, was also longtime friends for 30 years with my now running mate, Matt Brown, Jen's other co-founder, one of the many co-founders. So long story short, Scott and Matt had agreed that I should run for office. I was not aware of this. We met and had coffee, and Matt convinced me to run for office. I laughed in his face. Actually, he didn't convince me. He proposed it. I laughed in his face because it just seemed wild. It seemed absolutely wild to me. But soon after that, I met Jennifer Rourke and the third co-founder, Senator Janine Calkin. And they explained to me their process of having previously run without the support of the party, running on a bold platform for a living wage, environmental justice, racial justice, and just being shunned from resources and having to build a campaign from the ground up. And they knew there was a better way. And so they explained that struggle to me, and they really had recycled their struggle into a game plan for how working class people could run for office together in a cooperative way. So at that point, I stopped laughing and was like, okay, who's the baddest, biggest guy? Because I want to take him out, and decided to run and took on the Senate finance chair. He outspent us 4-1, and we beat him 62-38. But we were that was one of 10 wins in the 2020 cycle. A little bit of the nuts and bolts of it, because after saying yes to running, the first question as a working class person who deeply cares about the community and racial justice, environmental justice, living with all the things that we know we need, was how could I possibly do this? And so what the cooperative provided for me as a first-time candidate, had done activism work, but never worked on a campaign, I got a campaign plan. It broke down for me my win number for that cycle. It broke down for me the demographic and the previous voting patterns of my district. I got a canvassing plan of how much I would have to canvass and how long in order to hit that win number. I got a donation plan, how to donate, how to get donors, and how much I would need to raise by a certain point. So it had point by point. And I also got training. So there were 24 candidates in the first cycle. We all did training together, which was so much fun. And it also built a deep, deep sense of community. And we worked on policy together. So we started talking about education policy and honed that together. So that's a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how I went from this is crazy, laughing in their face, to yes, let's do it. And then the co-op provided the how, the infrastructure to have teachers, nurses, waitresses, activists, retail workers, single moms like me that worked in healthcare to all sit together, know that we are running on a shared platform. We worked on that platform together and knew we were going to share volunteers. And we had this literal binder of step by step of how to win.
And what's so interesting about this is, so there's always been groups and states that endorse multiple candidates. So you have, Planned Parenthood or the Sierra Club or Our Revolution, endorse candidates. So why is a political co-op different? And so there's an interesting kind of technical difference, which is that the co-op itself, the candidates share their money to pool together to hire staff. Am I getting that right? Tell us a bit about that techniques. Yeah, Jen.
Okay, so it's a little weird. Because the services that we provide, we can't do it for free legally. So the way that we're set up, we're not a 501c3, we're not a 501c4. So candidates all pay dues, and your dues provide you with the campaign plan, volunteer recruitment. We help you with fundraising, everything that you need from A to Z to run your campaign. And we have a small staff of people that work for the co-op, and they are the ones that receive the money from the dues. I don't get paid to do this work. So I get to do this for free, but I'm also a candidate. So I pay into the co-op, and there are people that help to make sure that our campaigns are coordinated properly. But we sit in a room together. We work on policy together. There's someone that puts it together in a way that we all agree on. But it's a dues paying organization, sort of like a consulting agency, except we don't charge an astronomical amount because most of the candidates running for office don't have the funding behind them to properly pay for a $15,000 a month consulting agency.
So as a candidate, it was really, the dues were very reasonable. And what I knew that I knew I was getting the most for my money because, like, for example, I was putting in an order for signs, but I knew other candidates were also putting an order for signs. So that brought the prices down for people. I also knew, okay, we got training on messaging. We were able to share and talk about messaging, hone it together. The co-op staff, also the co-op, what we paid for dues only covered the cost for the co-op to function, to give us exactly what we needed. So we were not, it's very, very different than consulting firms, which, have these inflated charges because the co-chairs themselves are just volunteering, and then you just are paying the staff in order to deliver what we need, oppo research, things like that we needed manpower for, volunteer retention, those types of things. So that's a little bit of the mechanism part of and how incredibly necessary. One other distinguishing thing, you mentioned endorsements and why that's different. Mm-hmm. The co-op is, as a candidate, it is night and day from other organizations that endorse. Other organizations traditionally that endorse, someone already knows they want to run for office. They're already seeking that. And those organizations come in and choose how viable that person is, how much, are they going to win? Are they challenging leadership? Do we want to piss off leadership? And then they make a calculation, and then give them a stamp, give them maybe some money and maybe a volunteer or two. This is completely different. The co-op is not actively seeking politicians. They're not actively seeking people who were, their ambition was to run for office. They're seeking community leaders, grassroots organizers, nurses and teachers and working class people, and literally bulldozing barriers for those people to get into office.
Yeah, and we don't do endorsements. So it's not technically an endorsement. It's someone that someone is brought to the co-op that says, hey, this person has been working in the community for 10 years. They believe in X, Y, and Z, and they would really make an awesome legislator.
Yeah, it's what I was so taken by when I first heard about this and why we wanted to raise you up at this event was, it's so deep, and it's the depth that is required, the depth of solidarity between candidates that is required to take on an establishment. As you laid out, Senator Mendes, it's, when these groups come in and they do their endorsements at the end, they're just happy because they're like, oh, someone was already going to win. I do my endorsement. Maybe I do one flyer for them. Maybe I'll get them $10,000 or something. And then at the end, I say, look at us. We're a very effective organization because our person that we endorsed won. What this really does is it says we are actually going to do a lot for you, and we're going to expect of you to do a lot for each other, which is the great cooperative or union or neighborhood solidarity group spirit, which is we're going to go deep, all for one for all. You got to put up a lot to be in, but then we're going to put up a lot for each other, and that's what's going to be required to make this happen. Any thoughts on that, Spirit?
It's absolutely true, and absolutely true. And I experienced that, firsthand. In my election, I thought it was just, even while I was doing it, it was just like the most wild thing. It just never, what are the chances that someone, a single mom, put myself through school, worked in the dental field, had to have a second job, was working in the community, could go to taking out the Senate finance chair in a year. You really have to have a solid infrastructure, not just of support, but of community. And that community mechanism is really important to when you win and you get in and it's time to now legislate and govern. Because what happens is if we've seen consistently, and I think other states have as well, that there's this vacuum, this conservative vacuum that happens in power structures. And they kind of grab onto people and pull them in. And it gets kind of hard to do the thing that you said you were going to do when you get in. And so in order to make that change in a meaningful amount of time, you have to do it quickly, which we did, and with 10 wins. And then you have to do it, boldly and together. And so what we're able to do instantly was get a $15 minimum wage, which the leadership was not interested in before, but they had to do it because they were losing elections. And so then we knew once we were in, we were going to fight for those same things. So when it was time to tag in and say, okay, there's a bad bill here. Okay, you're going to speak to it and I'm going to speak to it. And there was a collaborated while you're governing, because you had already built that team before.
Yeah. And the best thing is you're not alone. So running for office is very, very difficult, and a lot of people know this, but when you're knocking a door and you don't know how to answer that question, you can turn to a whole group of people behind you and say, hey, when you knocked a door, did someone ask you this? And then when we work on policy, we know that maybe you can't talk about specific policy in your district, but when you go up to the Statehouse and you're fighting, you know that you're going to support that policy. For example, the legalization of cannabis. Not everyone can speak about that in their district, but we all believe that it should be legalized, and with a huge majority of the funding go to social reinvestment. So there are certain things that we can do that the party doesn't do because they're all for self, but we're all for community, which is the best thing.
We were just one note on that, and I know you have more questions for us. A perfect example of this was the legalizing of cannabis. We actually got automatic expungement, which was thought to be impossible before we won this many seats. And Jen has been working on that from day one. And so to see it come to fruition was due to the collaboration of so many people that ran together and then got in together and fought for it and held the line.
This is so wonderful. And I want to get into details because everyone's now very excited about political and they want to know how to do it. But I have one more inspiration thing to gas us up on this, which is Senator Mendes and Jen, if you want to speak to this as well. You told me this thing in the past once where you said, one of the biggest transformative elements of the co-op was not just for the candidates, but it was for the ability to talk to people at the doors and give them a believable story about how change could actually happen that a candidate alone would not be able to do. Could either of you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I definitely considered when I was knocking on the door, it was a work of imagination. Because when you knock on a door as a working class person who had never previously been in politics and you want to tell them that you are running for office to be a senator, they had to be able to imagine it. And so to be able to say it is not just me and it is not just my values and this platform, but there's a nurse over in this district and there's a teacher in this district and there's a waitress in this district and a faith leader over in this district, and we're all doing this together. All of a sudden now they can believe that you have the ability to actually win, which they may be reluctant to actually believe that. They were like, I hope you win, but I don't know if you can. Oh, wait, there's a group of you. You can actually win. And when you're in there, you can be effective because there is that, oh, it's just one vote thing. And not only that, it was amazing to knock on the doors and see people kind of light up and go, oh, okay, I want to vote with my values, but there's this apprehension, right? They're afraid to do it. And so this closes that gap. And they're saying, you now have given me kind of a pathway to victory for all of us. And so I see that. And then they saw it happen. So in 2020, again, legalizing cannabis with automatic expungement, $15 minimum wage, climate legislation that had never been introduced before, all the things that we had been asked, a lot of things that we had been asking for. So now knocking on the doors, we don't have to say, I think it will happen because of a group of people, and like we can literally pull the articles. And I think you dropped one in the chat. We can drop the articles. We have the receipts.
Yeah, it's fun. When I knocked doors in 2018, I had no idea what I was doing, and people would always say, "Well, you're just one person." And it made a difference in 2020 when it was like, okay, well, I'm not alone now. So I still need your support. And for people to understand that it's just a group of working class people that are fighting for them, that live like them, and that are them, it did give a lot of people hope in this state. So
Wonderful. It's given me hope. It's given a lot of hope in the chat. I've seen over 6 folks say we got to bring this to our state. So it's working. Let's get into the nuts and bolts a bit. So someone asked, how do you decide who's in the co-op? Because once you start, going from an idea around the table to a power player in the state, suddenly everyone wants to be part of the co-op. The co-op could start getting watered down. The establishment might try to co-op the co-op. So what is the way you decide who gets in the co-op? And I guess I'll throw into that. How do you hold the co-op accountable to what they signed up for? So why don't we get into those hard questions?
That's great. Jen, you start with the criteria.
So when we first started, there were only 4 of us actually doing the work, like finding candidates, and then we were speaking to those candidates that we did find. But in order to be a member of the co-op, you have to hold to your values. You have to vow not to vote for leadership when you do win. You don't take money from any lobbyists, no fossil fuel executives, and you're actually going to do the work, and that you're not a crappy person. And that's a big thing. But we don't like the people that are always up front. We like to have the people who are behind the scenes that are doing the work, who never get credit for the work that they're doing. So it was a lot of that. And then after the 2020 process, we came up with this voting system. So there is a democracy within the co-op. So people get to vote on the candidates that are coming in. There's an interview process. You are asked specific questions that the candidates themselves have come up with. Everything from why are people poor to why is there, how can we make systemic change? Like there's a whole interview process that you go through, and then the candidates decide whether or not they feel as though you are actually going to stick to your word. So that was tough, creating that process from, the 4 of us doing this work nonstop to now we have an actual cooperative of people working together to make sure that we bring in good candidates. And there is a vetting process. We check everything from A to Z. I check your mother's maiden name. I check your mother's history. Did you kill a dog? I ask questions that most people don't ask. But there is a process that we do have in order for people to join the co-op. And if you do not stick to your word, you will be voted out. Yeah. And that has happened in the past.
And that speaks to the accountability piece. From the second, Jen, you can attest to this, from the second I became a candidate, I started recruiting. other people to run, because I knew that this was the mechanism for change that we needed. And one of the things that I particularly look for, and I think we all do that are looking for candidates, is someone that is doing the work but never would think it's them. So if someone was to come up to me and say, I've always wanted to run for office, I quickly turn in the other direction, because we're not their people. We're the people that say, I've marched for decades for LGBTQ rights and I'm tired. The nurse that says, hey, I'm sick of having people turn down treatment because they can't afford it. Those people, like, can we have coffee? Can we talk about how you can run for office? And so there's a deep personal investment about getting them to actually believe that they can do it. And I think that is really important to what you're trying to pinpoint about how does it not get watered down? How does it not get co-opted? It is, I firmly believe that before you can get a redistribution of wealth, before you can get redistribution of anything, you have to have a redistribution of power. And so I'm actively seeking people without power who are helping other people. And that is, I think, the anchor, the unspoken kind of anchor of the organization.
I love it. And, as was said, we don't have to name names of it happened, but it has happened already in the co-op that some people have broken the trust of the co-op, and the co-op doesn't let itself get watered down. They say, we have to live by our values together. That's one of the deals of all for one and one for all. So let's get in. And, another thing I've noticed in what y'all said is the power of the ask. This is one of the most powerful things in politics, is that there are so many people in your state right now, y'all in the audience, that are just waiting to be asked to say, I think you might never conceive of yourself as someone running for office, but I am going to ask you. We together as a co-op are going to ask you maybe consider joining us and running for office because you seem to fit the spirit. Let's talk a little bit about getting into the legislature. So one of the things, and this was mentioned in the chat too, it's not just that you run for office, then you govern together. And how does that work? And also, how have you seen that work? And also, how do you balance that? Sometimes you got to play the inside game and, play nice with leadership to get what you want. Other times you got to play the outside game and fight leadership to get what you want. So how do you think about that as a co-op?
So Janine Culkin, Senator Janine Culkin, Jennifer's other co-chair, had previously been in office. So she had served, and she dared to vote no. She dared to vote her conscience, and they ran a corporate lobbyist against her. And so she since then ran again with us in 2020 and won. And so we had a village elder. We had someone that had already gone through this and knows the kind of pitfalls and walked us all through it. So we met as soon as we won our elections. We met and we had a list of our policies already, and then we had some other bills that everybody else wanted, and we talked about who was going to sign whose bills and how we were going to push them forward and how we were going to organize together and how we were going to speak on them. And so that was part of it. So we had our meetings about that. We also were able to share the labor because there are tons of bills being flooded your way, especially at the end of session. It's almost impossible to read them all. And we care about our votes because we vote our conscience. So we're actually able to divide the labor here and say, I'm going to read these bills. Oh, I was in this committee. Look out, this one's a bad one. I think we need to put an amendment in this one, and be able to tag team and block bad bills as well. We were able to successfully do that in a case where a plastic burning factory was actually going to come in, and they bulldozed this in the last couple weeks of session, and we're going to let this environmentally disastrous agency kind of like come in, or a company come in, and we were able to organize and work with environmental orgs and block it, and it was never came to fruition, but we had enough voices. The inside, because I will say to the inside game, working with leadership thing, and I want Jen's thoughts on this. One of the reasons why the co-op has the agreement when you sign on to, when you're like, okay, I'm a candidate, I'm not going to vote for leadership, right? So to some people that may be like, okay, you just shot yourself in the foot. You're not going to vote for leadership. How are you going to get anything done? But we have to pan out and look at the co-op's long-term plan. The plan is not just to get a voting block in. It is to literally turn over the Statehouse in enough time to make systemic change. And that means in a couple of election cycles to have a different leadership. So why would we then wheel and deal and essentially give our power away to the leaders and then be swallowed up and enveloped into their power vacuum when we know our long game, which is not that long, is to take the seats, take the power, take the leadership positions. So we're less likely to wheel and deal because we're working on this long game that's currently working.
I will say, so working with leadership, how can you continue to work with the people that are constantly trying to hurt you? It's an abusive relationship. These are the people that have the power to make sure that our constituents are okay. They have the power to make sure that I am okay. And instead of using and wielding their power for good, they're creating this government that doesn't work for the people. So how do you work with people who are constantly fighting against everything that you are as a person, whether you're a Black or brown person, whether you're LGBTQIA+, or whether you're just a working class person who is just trying to survive? You cannot work with the people who are constantly fighting against you. So you can't work with them. So
I love that Jen said that. And I just wanted to connect one dot here. When you pick working class people that were not planning on being in office, they're not afraid to do that. Like, it wasn't my life goal to be a senator. So like, I'm not going to be afraid to hold the line because I know what it's like to be a woman of color in Rhode Island. So to you, Jen, like, that's where it comes full circle. And you're not like, oh no, it's going to ruin my political career. I wasn't here for that anyway.
We have such an important message. We have a few minutes left, like
Okay.
2 or 3 minutes left. And so I want to, first off, for those in the audience, we just put a poll out. Are you interested in political co-ops in your state? If you answer that poll, we'll put you on an email list to get you information about the Rhode Island Political Cooperative and who you need to talk to. But as a final kind of minute to each of you, what is your advice what is the future of the Rhode Island Political Co-op? Share a little bit about that. And what is your advice to folks in other states about starting political co-ops of their own?
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so the future of the co-op, we're going to continue to grow until we do have a governing majority of people who are working class people up at the Statehouse. So please continue to support. Like, we love receiving messages of support. That's really, really awesome, because there are days where it's just like you want to give up and you know that you can't because the people of Rhode Island depend on you. So receiving those messages is tremendous. But we are going to continue to grow. We are going to continue to look for the candidates that don't get the help. Someone said something in the chat about funding. A lot of us don't have money. I was working 3 jobs running for office and I have 4 kids. I don't have money like that, but the money will come from the people that believe in you.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just we're going to continue to grow, continue holding people accountable until we make sure that the people in Rhode Island are thriving.
I think my closing thoughts on that is that, for the past 50 years, we've watched the far right really grow state level power and grow power even, in DC and in the States. And so now we do not have 50 years to respond to that. And so I think that the co-op is not only going to create change for my constituents and for Rhode Islanders and Jen's future constituents, but I think it's going to create an example of how we can in real time address the nation's crisis by building state power, which is what this whole summit is about across the country. So I think it's going to be a spark for hope and a mechanism to redistribute power, which I said is, I think, where the change is going to start.
What a wonderful note to end on. I'll end on this, which is that what I've seen from the conversation in Rhode Island from afar, I don't live there, but for what I've seen from the outside, is that the situation has changed from people on our side reacting to what the establishment's doing to people on their side reacting to what co-op is doing, which shows you where power is moving, who is the first mover. So many people are hungry for not living in just reaction anymore, but actually being agents of our own destiny, co-creators of our own future. And the Rhode Island Political Co-op is a model that is the textbook model for claiming that in your Statehouse. So